Okay, let's get started. Welcome everybody. Good to see everyone. We had a bit of a break. I'll try to keep everybody posted on our schedule because there will be some times that we have to be away. But for now, we're here this week and we're here next week, and we're beginning some very fascinating, fantastic parshiot as we restart again, and that's part of our subject. We want to dedicate, of course, this learning today on the Yahrtzeit, to the 23rd Yahrtzeit of our son, Ari Yoshua Halevi, Hashem Yikom Damo, who fell in Shechem. Uh, it it was shortly after Simchat Torah, so it's not the same uh, Yahrtzeit or Askara for those who fell, um, soldiers and others, on Shiva October. But as I think I've mentioned, Chaf Daled B'Tishrei may at some point become the national commemoration for the Gaza war. Right now, it's still fresh, being referred to as 7th of October. So they're having these commemorations on the Loazi English date, but there's quite a strong determination to make sure that these dates are not on the English date, but on the Hebrew date. Discussing that with some army officials today, but that will probably come at some point in the near future. Right now, it's kind of understated on the 24th of Tishrei, which was the Hebrew date. They obviously, it's after Simchat Torah because they were not going to make a commemoration either on a Chag or on Isru Chag the day following. So the next available date was 2 days later, after the 7th of October, the 24th of Tishrei. So at the cemetery today, there were no other. We thought there might be, and maybe there were in the afternoon, perhaps, but there were no competing uh, um, Tikkasim events taking place, but that might happen in the future. So I want to talk about the issue of new beginnings and the idea of starting over. We have entered, and I'm going to kind of come back to this idea in a moment, but we have entered on Rosh Hashanah, Tafshin Pei Vav, 5,786. By tradition, uh, little under 6,000 years since the beginning of the world. And obviously, this raises a lot of scientific, philosophical questions. Is the world really only 5,000, almost 5,800 years old? We know from carbon dating that there are things that are much, much older than 6,000 years. And what do we do about that? How do we somehow explain the scientific reality that the world's been around a lot longer? And what do we do about dinosaurs? That's always pointed to. Now, you know that in certain circles, in Haredi circles, they just uh, dismiss that and say that no, there were no dinosaurs, that this is a figment of scientific imagination, that they dismiss any of the scientific relics. And as you know, in many of these homes, you cannot have anything to do with dinosaurs. You can't have, and I'm not making this up, you can check with some other individuals, that you cannot even have children's pajamas that have dinosaurs on them because they reject the whole idea that there were dinosaurs, because it raises the question, how can there be life and activity millions of years ago when the world is only Tafshin Pei Vav, 5,786 years old? So I want to focus for a moment on a very, very famous medrash. And we keep in mind this is a midrash, but it's quoted quite often. And this midrash in Bereshit Rabbah, it tells us and I quote, Rabbi Yehuda said, the pasuk in Bereshit, which is our parsha this week, says, "Let there." It does not say, "Let there be evening." It says, um, "Vayi'er vayivoker." There was evening and there was morning. So it doesn't say God created the evening. It just says, and it was there. So Rabbi Yehuda says, based on that, this must be proof that God didn't start this world by creating that first night, but the night was there. It was left over from a previous world, i.e., another world existed before this one. And he goes on to say, and there are others that join in this as well, he's not the only one, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created and destroyed many worlds until he finally created ours. And then he said, and in the Aramaic, Dain Hanyan Li Yaton Lo Hanyan Li. This world uh, pleases me, said God. The other worlds did not. So one of the opinion says, and I'm not sure exactly where they get these numbers, 974 or 1,000 worlds preceded this one, till you might say God got it right and said, this is a keeper. Others want to explain maybe it doesn't imply other worlds, but other generations that existed on this world until we finally came to the world we know today. And this is an attempt, therefore, to explain this puzzle of where did these old things, ancient, historical, documented things come from. Obviously, they're older than 6,000 years old. So they came from a different world or different generations. And those, in a sense, don't count anymore. Either God created this world anew, or that those worlds were on this planet, but the individuals or the living things, or maybe even the non-living things, those were from previous generations. And when the Torah says Hashem created the world, it's talking about this current world, not talking about those things that existed before. There is even, and I'm not going to go into it, but there's a whole treatise by Rav Soloveitchik where, because it has the story of creation of man, if you look at Bereshit, our Parsha, it's there twice. It's repeated. So he wants to say that there is, in a sense, prehistoric man and historic man, and that's another way of explaining that until historic man, which had the capacity to think on his own and to choose between good and evil and all kinds of other things, that there was a second stage of the creation which is which we are descended from, which that is where our start began. I'm not here to get into a scientific discussion about this, only to talk about this as a preamble to the whole issue of needing to start over. Because the question is, once we accept this, that there were previous worlds, the obvious question that the rabbis ask and struggle to answer: how do these worlds, as I quoted, were imperfect and God didn't approve of them, didn't like them, they didn't turn out well until we got to the world we know of today. But how do you explain that with an omnipotent, all-seeing God that exists in past, present, and future? Right? The name for Hashem, the Yud Ke Vav Ke, is composed of Haya, Hoveh, V'yeh. He was, he is, he will be. All simultaneously, by the way. God is in all those dimensions at the same time. So if God knows that these worlds are imperfect, why are they being created? Just go right to the chaste and create the world that is to Hashem's liking. And this is a very difficult question to answer. If Hashem knows they're imperfect and not acceptable, then why not just start with the world that we have? So I want to try to address this and come back to our contemporary situation now about, in a sense, our starting over. We're at the end of at least one phase of this war that has preoccupied us for 2 years. I'm not a great believer that we are in the clear, that we've done everything we need to do and it's all going to be peaches and cream from now on. I mean, we see already that I don't want to get too political, but we see already that this deal has broken down. No, we did not, even in the first phase, in the initial phase, we did not receive what we were told to receive. What I find completely and totally mystifying and frustrating is, why did we give back all of these murderers? I mean, there are these 250 mass murderers plus all the other murderers. Why would we not make sure that at least that part of the deal is fulfilled before we gave them the murderers? We could have even said, for every um, for every live or a deceased body, you'll get X number of these murderers back. And then we at least have something to hold over their head. Why would we, in our wildest nightmare, give them everything back and then start to argue about what we didn't get? So I'm not smart enough to know the answer to that, but it mystifies me. And it makes me understand that we're not necessarily at a complete new beginning, but we're somewhat at a new beginning, at least, because the war technically is, if not over, it's on pause, and we have received all of the living hostages back. So it leads me to talk about the whole concept of starting over, which is not a simple thing to do. So I want to take a look at something very fascinating truth about these first chapters in Bereshit and about the main characters. Of course, the main character of Bereshit is Adam Arishon. He's living the life. He is literally in Gan Eden. We joke about it, and we say, oh, yeah, pick whatever you want, Miami Beach or whatever, you can. I don't want to name any other cities because um, they've they're not exactly what they used to be, but whatever city people would pick and say, oh, I feel like I'm in Gan Eden. Well, he was in Gan Eden and he had whatever he wanted. He didn't have to work for a living. It was all right there for him. And we not even something that we can imagine. But obviously, whether you accept it literally or figuratively, in a very short amount of time, uh, Adam is forced to leave Gan Eden. After the initial sin, uh, he and his family have to leave. He now has to support himself. He has to work for a living and work very, very hard by the sweat of his brow. And he's got to make his way in a brave new world. And after what he had been experiencing, this must have been a tremendous trauma. But nevertheless, he doesn't have a choice. Don't forget, he also loses a child, and how difficult it is for any family to, in a sense, reorder their lives when they have, lo aleinu, should never happen to anyone, but you lose a child, and it's a completely new dynamic. I know that when we lost Ari, everything changes, and as the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim said to me, Yaakov, when he thought he had lost Yosef, so they tried to. The pasuk says there that they tried to uh, um, comfort him, to give him solace, and he refused to be comforted. And they were saying to him, but look at all the other children you have. You have 11 or 12, counting Dina, 12 other children. So, does it have to be the end of the world? And he explained to me, and this is so true, that a family is a unit. It doesn't matter whether there's two people, three people, five people, 12 people. Families are a unit. And when that unit is disturbed and something breaks that unity, no matter what remains, you're facing a major trauma. There's a piece missing. Just imagine how crazy people go when for something so simple and harmless as putting together a puzzle, and they find there's a piece missing, and they're so frustrated. You're playing a game. I play Scrabble often with one of my best friends, and you find out that there's a tile missing. You just can't really play the complete game, or a card missing from the deck. How much more so alachat kama v'chama when you're talking about the life. And this is something that Adam has to face. And then we move on to Noach, who is the next primary character, star of the show in the parsha that bears his name, the first person to have a parsha under his own name. And he too is someone that's going to have to make a new start. His whole world is disrupted. I mean, he's depending, we don't have all the facts there because the Torah is not telling us a tremendous amount about the story, but we can imagine that he's kind of going along. He's a leading what we might call just your average life. He's a good person. Nothing is, you should pardon the pun, nothing is rocking the boat. And then suddenly along comes HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, Noach, you're going to have to undertake a very extraordinary project, and you're going to have to build this teva. So Noach is thinking, you know, I'm 500 years old. Things are going well. Why do I have to change things? I have a routine for 500 years, 5 centuries, and now everything's going to change. Even more so, of course, 120 years later when the flood comes, because he's got that amount of time to build it, and you know uh, he's got to make this extraordinary change. He's leaving an entire world behind, everything he knows. Not only that, the Chazal tell us that the world physically changed, not just that the flood came and wiped out humanity, but everything was different after the flood. And you know uh, he's facing this crisis and understanding him. And how am I going to exist? Whatever you want to say about the other people living there, but okay, Zemashiesh, he lives in it, could be in a rough neighborhood, but still, there's other people around. Can you imagine living in a world where there are literally no other people around, just except your small family? And then Noach also. Um, First of all, he's got his own problems with his children. The whole story, without getting into it, with Ham and whatever it is he does to Noach, that his through Ham, his grandson is accursed. Right? We say Arur Canaan. So he's got definite family problems too, probably as a result of this trauma of having to change everything, discard everything, and take on a whole new world. So Noah too, he's not living in a society anymore. We're told that Noah is the first person who invents farming tools because he's got to learn to work the land, and he's got to make a living. And he also learns how to make wine. We can imagine that um, Yain yisamach levav enosh, wine brings a certain, not just happiness, but a certain easing of suffering. Since Noach, we've been using wine not only for joyous occasions to celebrate, but also when we need to relax. Have a cup of wine maybe before you go to bed and just kind of ease down from the hectic day you've had. And so Noach, he's got to make this whole new beginning as well, and it can't be very easy for him. And then we come to Abraham. He's the third partner in this trilogy. And he, just like Adam, who had to leave Gan Eden, and just like Noah, who had to, in a sense, depart and enter a brave new world, Abraham has to do the same. He has to leave everything behind him. He's also not young. So you can imagine he's not 500 years old like Noah, but he's no young kid. And it's obviously much more difficult for people who have become used to their living their ways. And he's told that Lech lecha mi artzecha mi moladtecha mi beit avicha, and here the Torah is telling us this is kind of a tripartite challenge for him because he's also leaving everything behind. So we could have just said Lech lecha, leave Abraham El haaretz asher areka, to the place I'll show you. But no, we have to actually delineate Artzecha, Moladetecha, Beit Avicha. Rashi talks about this. These are all difficulties in having to leave behind what you had. Your home. I mean, they're listed third because they're listed in the order of the most difficult. But leaving your home, that's the place you're used to. You know, you know, you know, where everything is in your home. You're comfortable in your home, and then leaving our Moladatecha, your birthplace, your hometown. You know all the streets. You know where everything is. You know where the good shopping is, and you know how to get around. And then Artsacha, your country, no matter what's going on there, you have a familiarity with your country, with your language, with your sports team, with your culture. And all of this is so hard for Abraham to have to do. It's a tremendous challenge that he's given. And he too has his own problems with his family. And um, it's exacerbated by the fact that he is leaving his hometown. He has to deal with this whole conflict between Yishmael and Yitzchak, and in a sense, he he has. Um, I mean, Yishmael is 13 years old when Yitzchak is born, so now he's got to start a whole new family in a sense and a family dynamic, and it's not easy. When you understand this and you learn these parshiot, especially because we develop the family of Abraham so much more, you begin to maybe take all this into account as to what they're going through as people. They're people. They're not demigods. They're not superhuman. They're people just like us, and they have the same emotions that we have. They have the same feelings we have. Okay, they've worked on themselves. They're spectacular people, but they're people nonetheless. So these three, Adam, Noah, and Abraham, they are very similar in their necessity to start life over again, and in very extreme ways. And we can ask, we can now understand a little bit. We ask this question: why did Hashem, if he knew what the worlds were going to be, why would he not just start with this world? And the answer I suggest to you is that, and the story of these three is that Hashem was putting into the DNA of the world. And in particular, I would say, leading up to and coming to its pinnacle in Abraham, especially within the Jewish people, the DNA of the ability to start over again, to be able to pick up the pieces and and forge out of what existed before a new beginning, and to be able to survive even though you're being asked to leave your former home. And I suggest that Hashem was trying to, in a sense, Hashem knows, of course, the future, to presage what is the history of the Jewish people. We are constantly having to start again. We're taking root in certain countries, and then those countries are expelling us, are throwing us out. And we don't have to list the litany of all the countries we've lived in, whether they are countries you consider to be tyrannical and despotic, or countries that you consider to be enlightened. It doesn't matter whether, we're talking about uh, Russia or uh, countries in the Middle East, like Syria or Iraq, or we're talking about countries like England and France. We've been thrown out of all these countries. As we say, I've been thrown out of better countries than yours. We can say sometimes, half in jest. How do we survive? How do we go on to build a new life, to recreate our institutions and keep them going, and to have the tenacity and the determination that we're not going to be consumed by depression? We're going to make it in this new country. Maybe you might say until we're thrown out of this one as well. Until, of course, we come, Baruch Hashem, back to our own country, Eretz Yisrael. But even out of Israel, we had to leave. Don't forget, there were two destructions. And Bezrat Hashem, there won't be a third. But twice we had to leave. We had to go to Babylonia. Then the Romans threw us out. So Hashem understood and knew this. So Hashem said, I will create this pattern. No, it doesn't seem logical on a spiritual level, but on the level that I want to do, says Hashem, this is necessary. This concept of building worlds and those seeing those worlds destroyed, and then coming and building new worlds. And this is what Adam did and Noach did and Abraham did. And that's what Hashem did in order to say, I did it, you can do it too. I built worlds, they were imperfect, it didn't work out, but the next one's going to be better. And this is put into the DNA of our DNA through Hashem via Adam, Noach, and Abraham to give us the capacity to leave, if we must, the one world behind and start a new one. And we have been remarkably successful in doing that. I think it's a miracle. The world can't understand it either. What is with the Jews? They were thrown out with barely the clothes on their back. They couldn't take anything with them. They come to a new country that is not necessarily amenable to them, made it many times hostile to them. Maybe they don't let them be anywhere near a full-fledged citizen. They can't run for office. They can't own land. They're limited. They can't go to universities. We faced all of those challenges, and we were somehow able to survive and flourish because we had it in our DNA. We are survivors. We are a people that leave a broken world and create a new one for us. And it's remarkable and something that we maybe gloss over, but we have to ask ourselves, how did we do it? How did we leave the Holocaust, broken, shattered people, and look what we built? And look what the survivors did in Israel, in America, in England, in many different places. where we became prominent citizens and we rebuilt those institutions and those communities. And so I think that we are facing a situation now, to bring it home. Um, it's not going to be easy if we have to face a new reality. I mean, 1,000 soldiers we've lost, 20,000 injured, so many others emotionally damaged, and we're thinking, how are we going to pick ourselves up and restore the glorious Israel that we had enjoyed for such a long time before this came? And the answer is, we're going to do it like we've always done it before. We're going to pick ourselves up and we're going to recreate those institutions, our communities. And yes, we have a lot of baggage to take with us and a lot of suffering and sadness that can't be erased, because that's reality. But we're not going to let it drag us down and prevent us from moving forward. So that, I think, is the message, that these first parshiot, next week, other things to talk about with Noah, but that's what these three parshiot together, they're sending that message that yes, worlds crumble, but new worlds can always be built. And that's essentially what we have to do. So on an individual, personal, family basis, it's something that our family has had to do, and so many other families who are mourning now since the this war began, whether it's within their own personal family of a relative, or whether it's friends or communities. Everybody is carrying around a certain amount of baggage, and we are simply going to have to lift ourselves up and believe that Hashem gave us the tools, gave us the talent, gave us the ability to be able to go on and perhaps even make life better than it was before. Although sometimes that seems really a far off goal, but we've done it before and we will be able to, Be'ezrat Hashem, do it again. So I wish everybody success in your own personal struggles, and joining in the national struggle to recreate this society. I hope that the help we're getting from the outside will really come true, and that will assist us. At the end of the day, we know that we have to do the heavy lifting ourselves, the hard work ourselves, and we can and we shall do it. Wish everybody a a Shabbat Shalom, B'sorot Tovot, Yeshuot v'Nechamot, and let us hope that we are indeed entering a new and more beautiful, more peaceful stage of our lives here in Israel and worldwide. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for tuning in. Next week, same time, same place.